They said it was just a car, that I was overreacting. But standing at a rainy bus stop in my graduation gown, soaked and alone, watching my sister pull up in a brand new BMW my parents gifted her for being responsible, something inside me cracked. It wasn't just about the car, it was about years of being the background to her spotlight. Every missed milestone, every "you're so independent," every forgotten victory. That day didn't break me. It revealed me. I was done waiting to be seen. You think you know this story, trust me you don't. And what happened next? You won't believe. Claire stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her graduation cap for what felt like the 10th time. The cap never quite sat right, and the tassel kept drifting into her eyes. She smoothed the front of her navy gown, exhaling slowly. This should have been a moment of pride, graduating with her MBA after years of juggling work classes and sleepless nights, but her chest felt tight. Not from nerves about the ceremony or even the future, it was the same familiar ache she'd felt since childhood, the quiet dread of wondering if her parents would show up, and if they did, whether they'd even be paying attention. She glanced at her phone. No messages, no "good luck today," not even a thumbs-up emoji, just silence. Claire's apartment was quiet, save for the ticking of the clock and the faint hum of traffic outside. Her roommate had already left to meet her own family for pre-ceremony photos. Claire, meanwhile, was waiting not for a ride, not for flowers, but for hope. Just a flicker that maybe today things would be different. As she slipped her feet into polished heels, her mind drifted back to the first time she noticed how differently things worked in her family. She was 6. It was Lexi's 3rd birthday. Her parents had rented a small petting zoo, complete with ponies and a clown. Lexi had run around in a pink tutu, giggling as everyone sang to her. Claire remembered asking, "Will I get a pony too on my birthday?" Her mum had smiled distractedly and said, "You're our independent girl, Claire. You don't need all that fuss." When Claire's birthday came 2 months later, it was dinner at home and a store-bought cake. No pony, no friends invited, just family. And when Lexi came down with a cold that night, Claire's birthday candles were blown out in a rush so Diane could tuck Lexi into bed. "We'll do something special next weekend," her mom had promised. But next weekend never came. By age 10, Claire had learned not to ask for too much. On Christmas, Lexi's gifts would spill across the living room in a glittering avalanche of bows and bright paper. Claire's presents were practical books, clothes, educational games. Things for your growth, her father would say with a proud nod. When she once dared to ask why Lexi got a dollhouse the size of a fridge while she got math puzzles, her mom answered, "Lexi's just more imaginative. You're our logical girl." In middle school, Claire's science project won first prize at the regional fair. She came home beaming, blue ribbon clutched in hand. Her mom glanced at it and said, "That's nice, sweetie," while spooning medicine into Lexi's mouth. Lexi had a mild cough that day. They never made it to the awards ceremony. Lexi, on the other hand, got a standing ovation at her 3rd grade spelling bee for coming in 3rd place. Claire remembered how their dad jumped up with a cheer that echoed through the auditorium. That night, Lexi got pizza cake and a new phone case. Claire sat quietly, trying to remember the last time anyone clapped for her. And through it all, her parents had a favourite phrase, "Claire's fine. She always figures things out." Being the girl who always figured things out meant being the girl no one needed to help celebrate or even see. She shook her head, trying to chase the memories away. Today wasn't about the past, it was supposed to be about her future, her moment. But it was hard to believe in that when every meaningful moment in her life had been quietly overshadowed by her sister's sparkle. Even now, she wondered, would her mom be more focused on Lexi's weekend brunch plans than Claire's graduation? Would her dad be too busy talking golf with Lexi's boyfriend to notice her name being called? Claire stared into the mirror one last time. She looked put together, hair curled, makeup, subtle eyes steady. But inside she was unravelling just a little. She picked up the old blue ribbon from her dresser, a keepsake she had never let go of. It had been years, but somehow it still felt like her only trophy, one no one had ever clapped for. She slipped the ribbon into her bag and whispered to herself, "You don't need an audience to matter." Then she walked out the door cap firmly in place and into the rain. Claire had always believed that high school would be her fresh start, a place where being smart and self-driven might finally mean something. And in some ways it did. Teachers admired her discipline, classmates sought her help with projects, and college counsellors marked her as one of the brightest students to come through Jefferson High in years. At 16, she won the statewide Academic Excellence Award, beating out hundreds of students across Washington. Her name was printed in the local paper, her photo featured on the school's website. The award ceremony was scheduled for a Saturday morning at the state capitol, an elegant affair with banners, speeches, and even a catered lunch. Claire had circled the date in red on the kitchen calendar months in advance and reminded her parents multiple times. That morning she came downstairs in a pressed blazer and a nervous smile, only to find her parents in casual clothes rushing around the kitchen. "We're not dressed yet?" Claire said cautiously. Greg barely looked up from buttering his toast. "Oh, sweetheart, we're not going to be able to make it. Lexi's cheer competition got moved up to 10. It's across town and we can't be in two places at once," Diane chimed in as she packed protein bars into Lexi's glittery cheer bag. "We're so proud of you, honey, but Lexi's squad is counting on her, and you're always so capable. You'll represent the family beautifully." Claire had stood there, mouth slightly open, as Lexi bounded down the stairs in her cheer uniform ponytail swinging. "Good luck, Claire," Lexi said breezily, grabbing her pom-poms. "Hope they give you one of those glass plaques." Claire had smiled back. "Yeah, me too." She took the bus alone, holding her speech in trembling hands. On stage, when she accepted the award and delivered her short speech about resilience and hard work, she searched the crowd for a familiar face. There were none. Afterward, the superintendent handed her a certificate and said, "Your parents must be very proud." She managed a nod and a practiced smile. They always said they were proud. They just never seemed to show up. A few days later, Claire came home early from school and paused by the front gate when she heard her mother chatting with their neighbour, Mrs. Connolly. "Claire's doing great," Diane said, her voice casual, almost dismissive. "But you know her, she doesn't need much. She's independent to a fault. Lexi, on the other hand, she really needs the support. She's sensitive, and we try to be there for every one of her events." Mrs. Connolly murmured something polite, but Claire's ears were ringing. She slipped in the side door and went straight to her room, pressing her back against the door. The words repeated in her mind, "Claire doesn't need much." It wasn't even said with malice. That made it worse. It was simply accepted truth. That evening, Evelyn came by for dinner. Claire's grandmother had always been a quiet force in her life, one who noticed details others ignored. She brought a small wrapped package with her that night. "I saw this and thought of you," Evelyn said, handing Claire the gift with a wink. Inside was a leather-bound journal embossed with her initials. "It's beautiful," Claire whispered, running her fingers over the soft cover. Evelyn leaned close. "Write it down. All of it. The good, the hard, the parts no one claps for. That way, even if they don't see it, it still exists. You exist." Claire swallowed hard, blinking back the sting in her eyes. "I don't always feel seen," she confessed quietly. Evelyn reached out and gently cupped her chin. "Being unseen doesn't mean you aren't real, my love. It just means some people don't know where to look. But you don't need their gaze to shine." That night, Claire wrote her first journal entry, won an award, gave a speech, sat alone, cried on the bus. But I still went. I still stood on that stage. I was there even if no one else was. She closed the journal and hugged it to her chest. For the first time in a long while, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she hadn't vanished completely. 2 days before graduation, Claire called her parents. She tried to sound casual, breezy, even as if this was just a logistical detail and not the aching reminder that her old Toyota was no longer reliable. The engine had been making ominous clunking sounds every time she climbed above 30 miles per hour. The mechanic had said it might last another week or it might die tomorrow. So she began forcing lightness into her voice. I was thinking about graduation day. The Toyota's acting up again and the mechanic isn't hopeful. There was a pause filled with keyboard clacks on her father's end. Finally, Greg said, "Can't one of your roommates drive you? They're all walking in the ceremony too," Claire replied, gripping the phone tighter. "We need to be on campus pretty early." "Oh," Diane chimed in, her voice airy as ever. "Well, there's always the bus. I think there's a direct line from your apartment to campus, isn't there?" Claire blinked, stunned. "You want me to take the bus? In my cap and gown?" "It's practical," Diane replied. "With traffic and parking, it might be easier. Besides, you're so independent. You've always managed." Claire's mouth opened, but no words came out. She stared at the chipped paint on her kitchen wall as her mother added, "Anyway, we'll see you there. It's going to be such a special day." The call ended before Claire could protest. She stood in the silence afterward, her phone still pressed to her ear. Maybe it would have been easier to accept if she didn't know what came next. The next day, Claire stopped by her parents' house to pick up a box of childhood keepsakes Evelyn had promised to set aside for her. It had been years since Claire stepped foot in the family home without Lexi orchestrating the atmosphere. The house looked just as pristine, just as performative. Pillows, fluffed, scented candles burning, the kind of house that smiled at guests, but sighed at its children. She was about to knock when she heard laughter from the driveway. Lexi's voice rang out clear and confident, followed by the unmistakable purr of a luxury engine. Claire turned the corner and froze. There it was, a brand new BMW gleaming under the overcast Seattle sky. Lexi leaned against it, tossing her blonde curls over one shoulder as she posed for a selfie. Claire Lexi called when she spotted her. "Come see? Isn't it amazing?" Claire walked up slowly, her shoes crunching on the driveway gravel. "Is this yours?" Lexi grinned. "Yep, early gift. Mum said it's to reward me for being more responsible this year." Claire blinked. "Responsible? You've only been working part-time for 3 months." "I know, right," Lexi said, opening the driver's door to show off the ivory leather interior. "But I've been budgeting and meal prepping. Mum says I'm finally growing up." Claire stared at the spotless car, the bow still looped across the hood. She felt like someone had punched her in the ribs and walked away, smiling. She turned to go, but Diane appeared on the front steps holding a coffee mug with the words, "Best Mum Ever," etched in gold. "Oh, Claire, you're leaving already." Claire didn't trust herself to speak. She shook her head, heading toward her car. Diane followed. "Are you upset about the car, honey? It's just a vehicle. Don't be so sensitive." Claire paused, slowly turning around. "I asked for help getting to my graduation," she said. "You told me to take the bus, and now Lexi gets a BMW for being responsible." Diane's smile stiffened. "Lexi's at a delicate point. We wanted to encourage her." Claire opened her car door, heart thudding. "And I'm what sturdy forgettable don't twist this," Diane said, sighing. "You've always been so independent. I thought you'd appreciate not having to rely on us." Claire got in and shut the door, the click loud in the quiet drive. She didn't look back as she pulled away, rain beginning to dot the windshield like tears she refused to let fall. Claire didn't sleep well that night. Every time she closed her eyes, all she could see was Lexi's smug grin and the gleam of that new BMW. Her phone lay silent on the nightstand, no apology, no second thoughts from her parents. She woke early the next morning restless and decided to return to the house. Evelyn's box of keepsakes was still waiting, and some part of her hoped that in the daylight everything would feel less surreal. The driveway was empty when she arrived. Lexi's new car must have been taken out for a spin. Claire used her key to let herself in the house quiet, but humming with familiarity. She moved toward the basement to grab the box, but paused when she heard voices coming from the kitchen. She didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the words stopped her cold. She's going to flip when she sees it, her father was saying, voice animated, that white paint and the custom trim. It's perfect for photos, Diane chimed in. Exactly. The dealership said we can get the bow installed right before Saturday. Lexi can drive it to the graduation park right by the entrance. Just think of the impression. Claire's breath caught. Will that be too much for Claire? Greg asked, though, without any real concern in his tone. She'll manage, Diane replied smoothly. She's used to being second fiddle. Besides, the ceremony's about the family, and Lexi's car is practically part of that now. She deserves to shine. Claire's stomach twisted. Her graduation, her day, had somehow been reduced to a backdrop for Lexi's new luxury statement. They weren't planning to drive Claire. They weren't even thinking about how she'd get there. Her ceremony had become a set piece in Lexi's performance. She stepped back instinctively, her heel bumping against the edge of the hallway table with a soft thud. The conversation in the kitchen stopped. Claire Diane called out, voice suddenly chipper too bright. We didn't hear you come in. Claire rounded the corner, slowly, eyes landing on her parents. Her mother quickly minimised the browser tab on the laptop, but not before Claire caught a glimpse how to pose your car for graduation photos. What was that? She asked quietly. Just looking at decor options, Diane said, standing. Lexi wants everything to look perfect for your big day, for my day. Claire repeated, her voice flat. Greg stepped forward, trying to change the subject. We were just saying how excited we are. Lexi's planning something special. She'll drive everyone there in the new car. It'll be great for photos. Claire stared at them, stunned. Drive everyone? Well, we thought it made sense, Diane said. It's such a big moment for Lexi, too. She's worked hard this year. She's not the one graduating, Claire snapped before she could stop herself. The silence that followed was thick. Claire felt the heat rise to her face, but she held their gaze. I asked for help, she said, her voice quieter now, but sharper. Not fanfare. Not a photo shoot. Just help getting to my graduation. Greg opened his mouth, but Claire shook her head. She saw the red ribbon they'd picked for the car bow lying beside the laptop. Her hands clenched at her sides. Never mind, she said softly. I'll figure it out. Like always. She turned before they could respond, grabbing Evelyn's box from the hallway bench. As she opened the door, Diane called after her, Claire, don't be so dramatic. Claire didn't answer. The air outside was brisk, the sky a dull grey, but she felt strangely calm. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it wasn't about logistics. It was about priority, and she had never been one. Back in her car, she placed the box gently on the passenger seat and sat in silence. Her hands trembled slightly, not from rage, but from clarity. They weren't going to change. Not now, not in time for Saturday. And maybe finally she was done trying to make them. The morning of Claire's graduation dawned grey and unwelcoming. Rain drizzled in a persistent mist, the kind that seeped into your coat and clung to your skin. She stood at the bus stop, cap and gown carefully layered over her navy dress, clutching a plastic folder to protect her hair from the damp. Her heels sank slightly into the wet gravel with every step. Cars whizzed past, headlights on in the early morning fog. One honked cheerily, and she glanced up to see a classmate in the passenger seat of a minivan waving from behind the window as her family drove her toward campus. Claire offered a small wave in return, then looked away quickly. Around her, the city stirred to life. Bicycles splashed through puddles, delivery vans hummed along, but no one looked twice at the lone woman in graduation regalia, waiting for public transit. No one, that is, except the woman sitting on the bench beneath the shelter. Claire hadn't noticed her at first. She was older, late 70s perhaps, with kind eyes and short silver hair, neatly tucked beneath a floral scarf. She wore a navy trench coat and clutched a wide umbrella like a cane. You graduating today? The woman asked, her voice low but clear. Claire hesitated, then nodded. University of Washington. The woman smiled. Congratulations. I'm Martha. Claire, she replied, grateful for the company, even from a stranger. Martha studied her thoughtfully. You look like you've earned this. Claire let out a dry laugh. Thanks, I've worked hard. I can tell, Martha said. Waiting at a rainy bus stop in full regalia isn't exactly how most imagine this day. Claire shrugged. Plans change. Martha's eyes narrowed just slightly. Family not around. Claire bit the inside of her cheek. They're coming, just in a different car. Let me guess, Martha said, her tone wry. You got the bus while someone else got the spotlight. Claire blinked, stunned. How did you... I've lived long enough to recognise that particular ache, Martha said gently. My brother got a convertible for his graduation. I got a hand-me-down bicycle. My parents didn't even make it to my nursing school pinning. Baseball game, I think. Claire exhaled, her guard lowering by degrees. I used to think it would change, that they'd see me eventually. Martha smiled, not unkindly. I used to think that too. The bus rumbled up the road, its brakes squealing as it pulled into the stop. Claire moved to board, but Martha held up a hand. One thing before we ride, she said. Their silence, their neglect, that doesn't decide your value. Don't let them define what you're worth by what they fail to see. Claire swallowed hard, her throat tightening. It's just hard not to wonder what's wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you, Martha said. There's something wrong with the way they've chosen to see. Big difference. Claire nodded slowly, then offered her arm to help Martha onto the bus. The driver, spotting Claire's gown, grinned. Graduation day. First rides on me, he said. Claire blinked. Really? Consider it a gift, he said, waving her on. Inside, the bus was half-empty quiet, except for the soft hiss of doors closing and the rhythmic swish of wipers against glass. Claire slid into a seat beside Martha, feeling the warmth of her presence, like a shield against the cold. As the city rolled by outside, Claire thought of all the times she'd been invisible, all the milestones celebrated quietly, if at all. And yet here she was, cap on her head diploma, hours away, not because anyone made room for her, but because she carved space for herself. Martha leaned closer. You remember what I said, Claire? She nodded. Their silence doesn't decide my value. Exactly. Martha smiled. Now let's go get you graduated. The bus jolted forward, merging into the early morning traffic, and Claire exhaled slowly. Her nerves had tightened into a knot, but somehow sitting next to Martha, the stranger with quiet wisdom and matching bruises, was softening the sting. Maybe it was the warmth in her voice, or the way she didn't look at Claire with pity, just understanding. The driver adjusted his mirror and called back, You graduating from UW? Claire nodded. Yes, sir. He grinned. Well, congratulations, you made it. Several other passengers, mostly strangers in scrubs or hoodies, turned at the sound and offered their own greetings. Congrats, young lady, said an older man reading the newspaper. Looking sharp in that cap and gown, added a woman clutching a toddler in her lap. Claire blinked, stunned by the unexpected kindness. She gave a small wave. Thank you. She hadn't realised how much she needed to hear those words until they were offered so freely by people who didn't know her, didn't owe her anything. It was like her heart, long clenched and braced against disappointment, had been handed a cup of something warm. I don't even know any of you, she whispered to Martha. Exactly, Martha replied. And they still see you. Let that sink in. Claire leaned back against the seat, letting herself smile for the first time that morning. Rain streaked across the bus windows, but the inside felt cocooned safe. For just a moment she forgot about the BMW, the missed birthdays, the ceremony that felt more like a prop than a milestone. She was just Claire graduating, surviving, still standing. Then her phone vibrated. She hesitated before checking it. A message from her mother. Mum Amber wants to take family photos with the new car right after the ceremony. Don't let the rain ruin your hair. Bring a brush or something. Claire stared at the screen. No good luck, no. We're proud of you. Just a logistical instruction centred around Lexi and her car. She felt the blood drain from her face. Martha noticed. Bad news. Claire shook her head slowly, tears welling. It's not even bad. It's just them. She handed Martha the phone. Martha read the message, lips tightening. Of course, she murmured. Of course the car gets top billing. Claire's hands trembled. She turned off the phone, pressed it face down against her lap, and looked out the window, willing the tears to stay hidden. But they came anyway, silent and warm, rolling down her cheeks, blending with the mist clinging to the glass. I don't think they even remember what today is supposed to mean, she whispered. They don't, Martha said simply. But that doesn't change what it means for you. Claire wiped her face with the sleeve of her gown, grateful for the calm presence beside her. The bus passed familiar landmarks now campus was near. Groups of families were arriving by the dozens, arms filled with flowers and balloons. The sidewalks buzzed with excitement, but inside the bus Claire sat still, letting the storm inside her pass. I don't want to cry when I walk across that stage, she said. Then don't, Martha replied. Cry now, let it out here, then walk with your head high. Claire nodded, her jaw tight. I just wanted them to be proud. They're not the only ones allowed to be, Martha said. Look at me. She turned slightly, her eyes serious. You're enough, Claire. You always have been. Claire breathed in, slow and shaky, then exhaled. Thank you, Martha patted her hand. You ready to be seen? Claire looked out the window again as the university's familiar brick buildings came into view, banners waving in the rain. Yeah, she said softly. I think I finally am. The bus slowed to a stop at the campus gate. Claire stood adjusting her cap. Martha gave her a small salute. Go get what's yours. Claire stepped off the bus, the rain easing to a drizzle. The crowd surged ahead, but she paused, her gown catching the breeze. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was chasing someone else's shadow. She was walking toward her own light. The campus buzzed with energy as Claire stepped into the quad, a sea of black gowns and colourful cords moving in waves. Proud families clutched cameras and bouquets, laughter mingling with the occasional shout of recognition. She weaved her way toward the graduate assembly area, scanning the crowd. No sign of her parents, not that she was surprised. She told herself they were probably parking, maybe stuck in traffic. Maybe they'd gotten lost trying to find the VIP section where Lexi could showcase the car. Still, the absence felt like a hand pressing against her chest, dull but unrelenting. She found her designated spot among the marketing graduates. Tyler, a classmate who'd struggled through half their group projects, waved at her. Hey Claire, you made it. Barely, she replied, offering a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Behind them, more students arrived, flanked by parents, offering last-minute hugs and photos. Claire adjusted her tassel, biting back the resentment crawling up her spine. Everyone else had someone hovering, making sure they looked perfect. She had Martha's blessing and a damp sleeve from the bus ride. Then, from the far side of the quad, she spotted it, the BMW. It was parked at an angle nose, gleaming in the grey light like a spotlight. Lexi stood beside it in a short, tight white dress and heels that didn't belong at a campus ceremony. Her blonde hair was curled to glossy perfection, one hand flipping through poses, while the other held her phone high for selfies. Their parents stood nearby, Greg adjusting the angle of the car, Diane smoothing out a red bow still tied across the hood. Claire stared, unmoving. She watched as her father motioned for Lexi to pose again, as her mother pulled out a compact to dab Lexi's face, as students slowed to glance a few, even snapping pictures. Some of them probably thought Lexi was the graduate. No one looked for Claire. She turned away. The call to assemble came minutes later, the procession forming in lines. Claire fell into place, expression blank. As they began the slow march toward the main hall, her phone buzzed again. She didn't look. Whatever it was, it could wait. Inside the auditorium, the air was warm and heavy with anticipation. Rows of families filled the seats, heads craning for glimpses of loved ones. Claire scanned the crowd, but didn't spot Evelyn Naomi or anyone she recognised. A small ache formed low in her stomach. She took her seat, heart thudding. Then the lights dimmed. The university president walked to the podium, welcomed the crowd, and introduced the commencement speaker, Dr. Eloise Park, a renowned executive in digital branding and UW alumna. Claire had heard the name, admired the woman from afar, but she hadn't expected what came next. Dr. Park stepped up, confident and calm, and smiled. Today, she began, I want to speak to those who weren't the loudest in the room, to those who worked quietly, steadily, and often invisibly to reach this moment. Claire's breath caught. We live in a world obsessed with recognition likes views applause. But let me be clear, visibility is not the same as value. Some of you had cheerleaders at every step. Some of you walked alone. But the strength it takes to keep going without a spotlight. She paused, eyes sweeping the room. That's a rare kind of power. Claire felt her throat tighten. True worth, Dr. Park continued, isn't granted by others. It's something you build within, brick by unseen brick. The students who learn this, they go on to lead in ways others can't. Because they're not chasing validation, they've already proven themselves to themselves. There was a murmur of agreement in the crowd. A few parents wiped tears. Claire sat very still. For the first time in days, something in her steadied. The speaker's final words echoed through the hall, you don't need to be seen to matter. But if today is your first time being recognised, soak it in. You earned every second. Claire blinked rapidly, refusing to let the tears fall just yet. Her parents hadn't noticed her, but someone finally had. Names were being called now. One after another, graduates made their way across the stage to receive their diplomas, some waving to families, others grinning ear to ear. Claire clutched the edge of her seat, her palms damp. Her name was only a few rows away. She glanced again into the crowd. From her seat, she still couldn't spot her parents. Maybe they were in the back. Maybe they hadn't even made it in yet. Or maybe they were outside taking more photos with the car. A familiar voice crackled over the speaker, Claire Henderson, Master of Business Administration. The auditorium swelled with light applause as she rose. Claire's legs felt numb. She took one breath, then another, and stepped forward. The spotlight hit her full on. It was bright, harsh even, and for a second she wanted to shrink away from it. She kept her gaze forward, not daring to look into the seats. Not yet. She took the first step up the stairs. Then she heard it. A cheer, loud and unfiltered. It started in the back of the auditorium and rose in volume, not just polite clapping, but actual shouting, Claire's name repeated with joy. She turned her head sharply, instinct taking over, and scanned the crowd. There, way in the last row near the exit doors, stood Evelyn, waving both hands in the air. Naomi was beside her, jumping up and down in heels that clearly weren't made for enthusiasm. And behind them, Claire's old team from the campus library had somehow unfurled a handmade banner in giant block letters, Congratulations, Claire. We see you. Claire stopped in her tracks. The crowd turned curious. A ripple moved through the room. The speaker paused. Then something even more unexpected. A pocket of applause grew, fed by the joy radiating from the back of the room. People who didn't even know her started clapping louder. Not because they recognised her, but because they recognised the feeling of being overlooked, of finally being seen. The rest of the hall joined in. The applause swelled. Claire blinked hard, her breath catching in her throat. She took the final steps to the centre of the stage. The dean handed her the diploma, murmured a soft, "Well done," and gently guided her forward. The lights seemed softer now, warmer. The banner, still waving in the back, was like a beacon. As she crossed to the other side of the stage, Claire turned one last time and looked toward the front rows. That's when she saw them. Her parents were seated halfway up the left side, her father looking vaguely confused, her mother frozen with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Lexi sat with one perfectly arched brow raised, scrolling through her phone. None of them were clapping. Claire faced forward again and walked off the stage. As she made her way back to her seat, Naomi caught her eye and gave a double thumbs up from across the room. Evelyn blew her a kiss. Claire felt a rush of emotion she hadn't known she was capable of. Not sadness, not bitterness, gratitude. They had come, the ones who had seen her in small ways every step of the journey. The ones who remembered not just the big moments, but all the quiet battles in between. The real cheerleaders. When the final name was called and caps were tossed in the air, Claire stood quietly, her hands clutching her diploma like an anchor. The moment was hers, not borrowed, not shared, hers. The crowd spilled from the auditorium into the courtyard umbrellas, popping open like blooms in the misty rain. Graduates hugged, cried, posed for photos, their families surrounding them like warm circles of pride. Claire lingered at the edge of the crowd, caught in a bubble of disbelief. Her hands still trembled slightly around her diploma, the banner, the applause, Evelyn's voice shouting her name above all others. It was all real, Claire. Her mother's voice pierced the crowd, sharp and urgent. She turned to see Greg and Diane weaving through the bodies, Lexi trailing behind in her pristine white dress, a designer clutch dangling from her wrist. Her heels clicked decisively against the wet pavement. "There you are," Diane said, out of breath. "We've been looking everywhere." Claire didn't respond. She tucked her diploma carefully under her arm and waited. Lexi stepped forward, her phone already unlocked. "Okay, we need a family photo by the car, like now. The light's perfect and the drizzle gives it a sort of cinematic mood." Greg nodded, already turning toward the parking lot. "We parked it right by the rose garden. VIP section. It'll be great for the Christmas card." Claire stood rooted. "I'm not going," Diane blinked. "What? I'm not posing in front of Lexi's car," Claire said. "Not today." Lexi frowned. "Claire, it's just a picture." "No," Claire repeated louder this time. "This is not your photo shoot. This is not a luxury car ad. This is my graduation, and I will not let you turn it into a backdrop for someone else's trophy." Greg stiffened. "Claire, you're overreacting. It's just a few photos." "No," she said again, the word cutting clean and sharp. "It's not just photos. It's never just been photos. It's every moment I've been made invisible so Lexi could shine. Every award ignored. Every birthday passed over. Every conversation that starts with, 'We're so proud of Lexi,' and ends with, 'Claire, don't be dramatic.'" Lexi shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't mean—" "This isn't about you," Claire snapped. "Not this time." The courtyard had grown quieter around them. A few heads had turned. Claire didn't care. Greg's jaw tightened. "We just wanted to celebrate as a family." "No," Claire said again. "You wanted to parade the car. You wanted a photo to prove something, but not once did you ask what I wanted." Diane opened her mouth, then closed it. Her face was pale. She looked around nervously, as if searching for a way to redirect or excuse. Claire stepped back. "You can take your photo without me. I'll be with the people who actually showed up for me today." She turned, scanning the crowd, and spotted Naomi waving near the fountain. Evelyn was beside her, holding 2 umbrellas and smiling with the quiet steadiness of someone who had seen all this coming. "Claire, wait," Diane called. But Claire didn't stop. She walked toward the women who had cheered for her when no one else did, the ones who knew what her name sounded like when spoken with pride, the ones who had made her feel for the first time like she was more than an afterthought. She didn't look back. Claire hadn't gone more than a dozen steps before she heard another voice behind her, steadier, older, cutting through the tension like a chisel through stone. "Diane." She turned just in time to see Evelyn stepping forward, umbrella in hand, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun that somehow made her look taller, firmer. Her eyes were locked on her daughter, unblinking. Mom, Diane said, startled. "You're repeating the same mistake your father made with Carol," Evelyn said flatly. Claire stopped walking. Naomi, who'd just reached her, placed a gentle hand on her back but said nothing. They both turned to watch. Diane blinked, rapidly. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about," Evelyn said. Carol worked twice as hard, got half the attention, and all she ever heard was, "Why can't you be more like Diane?" And now here we are, years later, with Claire, standing in Carol's shoes, and you playing your father's part. Greg's eyebrows rose. "Carol, this isn't the same. It's exactly the same," Evelyn snapped. "And don't pretend you don't see it. Claire graduated with honours today. She took care of herself for years, earned her place, paid her dues, and instead of celebrating her, you handed the stage to Lexi. Again." Lexi crossed her arms. "I didn't ask for—" "This isn't about what you asked for." Evelyn interrupted, her voice sharp as glass. "It's about what you've been given constantly, automatically, without question." Diane's face flushed deep red. She looked around, clearly aware that more people were watching now, but she didn't move. "You think being independent means she doesn't need support?" Evelyn asked. "No. It means she learned not to expect it." Claire felt her chest tighten. For a moment she thought Evelyn might stop there, but the older woman wasn't finished. "Diane," she said, quieter now, but no less firm, "you resented how your parents treated Carol. You told me you'd never do the same. But look at this. Your eldest daughter stood on a stage today alone, and when she finally found the courage to speak up, you called her dramatic." Diane opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Greg glanced at Claire, his expression troubled but uncertain, like a man watching cracks form in the foundation he thought would hold forever. Evelyn turned toward Claire, then her face softening. "You don't owe them your silence, sweetheart." Claire nodded slowly, her throat thick. "I know." Naomi stepped closer. "Ready?" Claire glanced back one last time. Diane still stood frozen, and Lexi for once wasn't posing. The umbrella hung limp in her hand, mascara slightly smudged by the rain. Claire turned and walked away. This time her steps felt different. Not like fleeing, not like being cast out. They felt like flight. Halfway down the path toward the garden, Naomi bumped her shoulder gently. "You okay?" Claire exhaled. "Better than okay." Then unexpectedly a laugh escaped her, not bitter or biting, just free. It bubbled out, surprising even herself. Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Was that a giggle, I think it was?" Claire said, grinning. "God, what a day." They rounded the corner to find Evelyn already waiting near the fountain umbrella, raised like a victory flag. Claire wrapped her arms around her grandmother, who hugged her tightly. "You did good," Evelyn whispered. Claire pulled back, still smiling. "So did you." They took their own photos by the garden, not beside a BMW, or with a perfect pose, but with real smiles, muddy heels, and laughter that didn't need permission. For the first time in her life, Claire wasn't the supporting character in someone else's story. She was her own headline. Claire had barely finished changing out of her gown when she heard the knock at the door. It was soft at first, then louder, insistent. She didn't move. Naomi, still in the kitchen making tea, peeked down the hallway. "Want me to get that?" Claire shook her head and walked slowly to the door. When she opened it, her parents stood on the porch, Greg, in his pressed button-down, still damp from the rain. Diane with a tote bag hanging from her shoulder and tension radiating off her in waves. "We need to talk," Diane said, her tone clipped. Claire stepped aside. "I figured this was coming." They moved into the living room, perching stiffly on the edge of her second-hand sofa. Claire remained standing. Naomi handed her a steaming mug and gave her a look that said, "Holler if you need backup," then slipped into the other room. Greg started first. "Claire, what happened back there was honestly embarrassing, publicly refusing to take a family photo." "That wasn't necessary." You humiliated your sister, Diane added, and us, on a day that should have been celebratory. Claire let out a soft, bitter laugh, celebratory for whom Diane frowned. You're twisting things. We were trying to include you. No, Claire said flatly. You were trying to feature the car. You wanted Lexi's BMW to be the centre of my graduation. You didn't even ask if I had a way to get there. Greg sighed. We just thought you'd be fine. You always are. Claire turned, walked to her bookshelf and pulled out a worn shoebox. She returned to the living room and placed it on the coffee table. What's this? Diane asked. Claire opened the lid and began laying the contents out one by one. A birthday card with her name misspelled, no money inside. A photo from Lexi's Sweet 16 party, with rented tents and dozens of guests. Next to it, a picture of Claire's 16th birthday alone at a diner. A newspaper clipping announcing Claire's regional science fair win creased and yellowed. Beside it, a printed invitation to Lexi's middle school dance recital laminated. A congratulatory email from her professor. Her college acceptance letter. A faded post-it note from Diane that read, "Buy milk." And finally a small envelope containing her bus ticket from graduation day. I kept these, Claire said softly, so I wouldn't gaslight myself. Diane's face paled. Greg looked away. Every time I thought I was overreacting, that I was imagining the favoritism, I opened this box. Just to remind myself I wasn't crazy. You don't understand, Diane said, her voice unsteady. We didn't mean to. No, you never meant to, Claire interrupted. But that doesn't erase what did happen. Greg rubbed his forehead. Claire, this is all very emotional. Maybe now's not the time, Claire turned to her mother, eyes locked. I just have one question, she said, voice quieter now, and I want you to answer it honestly. Diane met her gaze, wary. If I was never going to be enough, Claire said, if I was always going to come second, if loving me was something you had to ration or forget, then why did you even have me? The room went still. Diane's lips parted. Her eyes shimmered. I don't know, she whispered. Claire nodded once. It wasn't an answer. But it was at least the truth. She gathered the box, returned the pieces one by one, slowly, methodically. Then she closed the lid and stood tall. I'm done asking for what should have been given freely. Greg stood too uncertain. Claire, don't walk away from us. I'm not, she said. I'm walking toward myself. Before anyone could respond to Claire's final words, another knock came at the door, sharp, deliberate. Claire opened it to find Evelyn standing there, her coat dusted with rain, her expression unreadable. She held a small handbag in one hand and a folder tucked under her arm. I figured I should come before things got worse, she said simply. Claire stepped aside, and Evelyn entered, eyes scanning the living room like she could already sense the emotional residue in the air. Diane stood startled. Mum, what are you doing here? Evelyn didn't answer right away. She moved with the slow precision of someone who had waited a long time for this moment. Her gaze settled on Diane and Greg. I've been quiet too long, she said, and that silence has cost more than I want to admit. Greg gestured to the shoebox still on the table. She's keeping score now. No, Evelyn said, her tone like stone. She's keeping proof, because nobody else has. Diane opened her mouth, but Evelyn raised a hand. You don't get to interrupt me. Not today. She turned her attention squarely on her daughter. You remember what it felt like, Diane, to watch your sister get praised for existing while you bent yourself in half trying to earn half a glance. You remember the birthdays Dad forgot, the competitions, Mom skipped the college acceptance letter, you framed yourself because no one else bothered. Diane's face fell, her composure cracking. That was different. It was the same, Evelyn said, voice low but firm. And you swore to me at 19 through tears on our porch that you would never do that to your children. But here we are. Claire stood still, watching her mother shrink in front of her grandmother, the family hierarchy rearranging in real time. You learned survival by being invisible, Evelyn continued. And instead of breaking the cycle, you handed it to Claire like an heirloom. Tears welled in Diane's eyes, but Evelyn didn't soften. You gave Lexi the pedestal you never had. And in doing so, you repeated every wound you spent a lifetime trying to heal. Greg shifted in his seat. You're making this too dramatic. Evelyn turned sharply. No, Greg. What's dramatic is your daughter riding a bus in the rain to her own graduation while you adjusted a red bow on a BMW. Silence stretched thick as fog. Claire stepped forward, then her voice calm and unshaking. I'm not asking you to fix what you broke. I've stopped waiting for that. She looked directly at her parents, her gaze steady. But I am telling you this, I'm setting boundaries. Greg frowned. What does that mean? It means I won't be guilted into family dinners where I'm ignored, Claire said. It means I won't sit through conversations that revolve around Lexi while my own life is invisible. Diane wiped her face, mascara smudging beneath her eyes. Claire, I didn't know how to love you properly. Claire softened just slightly. Then maybe it's time we stop pretending this version of love ever worked. Evelyn walked to her side, placing a hand on her shoulder. You can't rewrite their story, she whispered, but you can stop it from becoming yours. Claire nodded. Exactly. I can't fix this family, but I can stop it from continuing to hurt me. The words hung there, truths too long buried finally spoken aloud. Diane looked down at her hands. Greg stared at the wall. Neither had a script for this moment. Claire, for the first time, didn't need one. Claire stood in the centre of her new apartment in Portland, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, and the kind of silence that didn't sting, it soothed. The space was small, just one bedroom and a combined kitchen-living area, but the windows were large and the floors creaked with charm. She had no view, but for the first time, she didn't feel like she needed one. The view she wanted was already within her reach. Her new job at a mid-sized marketing firm started Monday. The pay wasn't extravagant, but it was enough. Enough to live, to breathe, to build something from scratch, something that belonged only to her. She lit a candle on the counter, the lavender scent wafting into the air, and opened a box labelled Fragile Books plus Grandma. Inside was the journal Evelyn had given her years ago, its cover worn smooth from use. She smiled and set it gently on the windowsill. A soft knock at the door made her pause. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened it, Lexi stood there, one hand gripping the strap of her handbag, the other holding a small box. Hey, Lexi said quietly. You have a minute. Claire blinked. How did you Mum told me where you moved? I didn't come to intrude. I wanted to give you something. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, but her steps were hesitant, like she wasn't sure she belonged here. Claire didn't stop her. Lexi looked around, taking in the apartment. This is cute, she said softly. Very you. Claire raised an eyebrow, meaning what Lexi half smiled. Smart, clean, uncomplicated. There was a pause. Then Lexi extended the small box. Claire took it, lifted the lid, and froze. Inside was the faded blue ribbon from her childhood, the science fair prize she had once held so tightly, the one her parents had barely acknowledged. Claire looked up, eyes wide. I found it when we were clearing out the garage, Lexi said. I didn't know I had kept it. Maybe even back then. I knew it mattered. Claire's throat tightened. Why are you giving it to me now? Lexi shrugged, suddenly unsure. Because I think I finally get it. I mean, not all of it. I don't think I ever could. But I see more than I used to. I used to think you didn't care about recognition, that you were above it. But maybe I just didn't want to see what was right in front of me. Claire ran her thumb over the frayed edge of the ribbon. I've been trying to remember when we stopped being sisters, Lexi continued. And I think maybe we never really were. I think we were just two kids playing roles someone else wrote. Claire looked at her, really looked. For once, Lexi wasn't composed or curated. She was just a woman trying to make something right, however late. "I'm not asking you to forgive everything," Lexi said. "I just wanted you to have that." Claire nodded slowly. "Thank you." They stood in silence for a moment, not awkward, but heavy, with everything left unsaid. Lexi smiled, a small, sad version of her usual sparkle. "You're going to do amazing things here." Claire smiled back. "So are you, eventually." Lexi chuckled. "Touché." She stepped toward the door. "Well, I should let you get back to nesting, or whatever people do after escaping the family circus." Claire walked her to the door. "Lexi." Lexi turned. "I think this is a beginning," Claire said. "Not a reset, just a beginning." Lexi nodded. "I hope so." She stepped into the hallway, then paused. "Oh, and Claire. Yeah, you looked incredible in that cap and gown." Claire laughed, the sound bright and unburdened. "Took you long enough." Lexi winked and disappeared down the stairs. Claire closed the door and returned to her windowsill, placing the ribbon beside the journal. A beginning, and this time she was writing it herself. The afternoon light in Claire's new apartment cast long golden stripes across the wooden floor. She sat cross-legged by the window, the newly rediscovered blue ribbon resting beside her like a quiet artifact from another life. Beside it lay the leather-bound journal Evelyn had gifted her so many years ago, the one that had in many ways saved her. She hadn't opened it in weeks. But today something tugged at her, gentle but persistent. She flipped through the pages, entries scribbled in rushed penmanship, thoughts scrawled between study notes and tear-stained reflections. Her fingers stopped at a page with slightly smudged ink, a passage she barely remembered writing. "I am not invisible. I am simply waiting for the world to catch up." She smiled. At the back of the journal, Evelyn had written a quote in looping script. "Your worth doesn't wait for permission." Claire traced the words with her fingertips. She read them once, then again. And for the first time, she didn't feel like she was trying to believe them. She simply knew them to be true. Outside, the city moved with its own rhythm, cars honking, dogs barking, the distant hum of life going on. Claire leaned her head against the cool window pane and let the stillness wrap around her like a second skin. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced over, expecting a work update or a random newsletter. But when she picked it up, the name on the screen made her pause. Mum. For a second, she debated ignoring it. Then she took a deep breath and opened the message. "Hi, Claire. I know it's been a lot. We're still processing everything, and I imagine you are too. But your father and I were wondering, could we visit, not to lecture, not to fix anything, just to see where you are now, if you're okay with that?" Claire stared at the screen. No instructions, no passive-aggressive guilt, no mention of Lexi or the car or photo ops, just a question, a request. She reread it, heart-thudding, not with fear, but with something new, possibility. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she rose, picked up the journal and the ribbon, and placed both gently on a shelf above her desk. The shelf was empty before. It felt right somehow to begin filling it now. Then she walked to the mirror and looked at herself, not to fix her hair, not to examine flaws, but to really look. She saw strength in her eyes, not bitterness, not vengeance, peace. She returned to her phone and typed a reply. "Yes, but only if we start from where I am now, not who you assumed I was then." She hovered over the send button, then tapped it without flinching. Outside the window, the light had shifted again, warmer now, streaking the buildings with orange and pink. It was the kind of evening light that whispered you made it through the day, the kind that hinted at new chapters and clean pages. Claire stood quietly watching the colours stretch and change. She didn't know what would happen when her parents arrived. She didn't know if they'd truly changed or if the effort would fade with time. But that was okay. She wasn't waiting anymore. This wasn't closure. It was ignition. Her story was no longer about being overlooked. It was about being seen first by strangers, then by herself, and maybe one day by the very people who had missed her light for so long. She reached for the journal again and opened to a fresh page. "Day 1, she wrote, "of the life I chose, not the one I was handed." She set the pen down, not with a sigh, but with a smile. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning.